Hello, and welcome to Weekend Wisdom. My name is Tracy Whitney. I'm the host of the creatingafamily.org podcasts. This one and our hour-long weekly podcast on Wednesdays called Creating a Family, talk about adoption, foster care, and kinship care. We love Weekend Wisdom because it's an opportunity to bring very practical tips to strengthen your family based on the questions that you ask us. So if you have a question about adoption, foster care, or kinship care, please send it to info@creatingafamily.org. We'll comb through our archives, listen to guest experts, and put together an answer that we think will help your family with the question that you pose. Today's question is from Mary. She wrote to us recently asking for tips or resources to help transition a child from a foster care situation to an adoption placement relationship. I've put together a few tips that I think will help her, and I hope you other listeners find them helpful as well. So here are our 5 tips for transitioning a child from foster care to adoption. When you are adopting a foster child, whether they've lived with you for a while or you're now adopting them from foster care without fostering them first, preparation for the change and the time period of the transition is key for you, for them, and for the family members who are already living in your home. So tip number 1 sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's to go ahead and slow things down. It's totally okay to slow your roll. Even if you are eager to adopt this child officially, remember that they might have some pretty big feelings and thoughts about the process. It's okay to slow down things to accommodate their hesitance or their questions and make sure that everyone involved is ready to handle the changes that are coming. It might be helpful for you to consider this transition, Mary, as a change in mindset, not just a change in status or a change in location. So if you go from fostering and questions about end dates to family and permanence, it can be a tough transition for a kid to make. Taking your time to help them understand and reframe what is happening will set all of you up for success. For example, one reframe could be being a foster child is one mindset, and now being a legal son or daughter is another mindset. And so you want to make sure that you're taking things slowly and thoughtfully and intentionally enough that they can kind of keep up with you in that transition. Again, this child may not have lived with you for very long or lived with you at all. So you have to work with the caseworker to set up that transition properly. If the child is not living with you, you want to start slowly with short visits and phone calls or FaceTimes. Schedule a night out for an ice cream date or schedule a visit with the foster family, and then just gradually increase the time that you spend with this child, leading to maybe 1 or 2 overnights or a weekend visit, so that the child has time to kind of step into this new status and this new role carefully and slowly with space to ask all the questions that they have. Whether they are currently living with you or not, you can use that transition time to also educate yourself and other family members on issues of trauma and the impacts that trauma might have. You can discuss with the kids who might already be living in the home what it's like to be a foster child versus what it's like to be an adopted child, help them understand the difference between the two mindsets, if you will, and then be really sure to speak specifically to your family members who are already living in the house about what difficulties the transition might bring for this child, like difficult behaviors or sleep disruptions, acting out, control issues are common, sibling issues are common, self-isolation is common. So you should talk with the people that are already in your home, whether they're adults or children, to talk about how you're going to handle those things if you haven't already faced them in previous adoptions or previous placements. So discussing how things might change in the child's mindset and what that might look like is important. Also, if you've not had this child in your home before, You should help the children already in your home or the adults already in your home understand what a big shift this mindset can be for a child who's moving from fostering to adopting. So use the extended time as you're slowing things down to think about the issues, to create a safe space for everyone's questions, and to take your time to discuss the things that your family has questions about or wants to learn more about or needs to learn more about. And remember, this transition can be as long and slow as you need it to be, regardless of how quickly or how slowly the system is progressing through the process. Because the transition, if you're treating it as a mindset, the transition is more in your control in that way. Obviously, the physical placement of the child can impact that. And so the second thing I would recommend is to create a life book with them or for them. So during the transition, while you're waiting for the child to be placed in your home, or while you're waiting for the adoption to be finalized, you can work on a life book, which we will link in the show notes for you. The book doesn't have to be fancy or a big, overwhelming project. It's really just kind of a visual timeline of this child's life and their story that can help you help them process their story. So you're going to be compiling important information and photos. The caseworker or former foster families might be able to inform this life book project with you. If you have access to the birth family, the biological family might be able to supply information. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, those kinds of things could help contribute to the life book. Creating it with the child, if you can, or in preparation for the child, can show this child how much you value their story. It can also help them make sense of their story, and it can help them figure out where you fall in their story and the timeline of everything that's happened. Timelines can be really fuzzy for kids, especially in foster care when they're moved frequently or when they've had multiple placements. You can build trust between you and this soon-to-be adopted child by continuing to add to the book over the course of their life. You can invite them to join in the creation. Some kids really get into it. Some kids don't really want any part of it, but doing it with them or for them and talking through what you're adding to the book as you add it can be a real conversation opener that makes them feel safe. And that leads me to tip number 3. You want to make space for their mixed feelings that come with going from being a foster child to being an adopted child. You love this child and you're excited about this child's arrival and permanency in your family, but this child may have and quite likely has very mixed feelings about all of this. They could be afraid, they could be confused, they could be excited, but they could also just have all of that going on inside of them at once. And that's a hard place for kids to be. So you want to try and take stock of things like how they've handled big changes in the past. And if you don't have firsthand experience with that, you'll want to get that information from former foster workers or former caseworkers, things like that. You want to learn and observe and connect with their natural temperament and how you think they're handling their feelings. Some kids are introverts and they will process this kind of stuff internally. Some kids are outward, external processors, and so they'll be looking for another safe person to process this information with. There's some significant changes coming their way, and so you want to observe and prepare yourself for how they might handle those significant changes. For example, consider how you plan to acknowledge the child's adoption finalization. Planning a huge celebration for this child might be really overwhelming for them, especially if they're new to your family or new to your family dynamics. You want to sound them out if they're old enough to have a voice and a choice. Sound them out on the ideas, observe their reactions to your suggestions, and figure out what you think their coping skills might be. Remember that they may be tempted to say yes just to please you or because you may expect it of them or they sense that you expect it of them. So instead, again, you're moving slowly. Maybe consider delaying any celebration until you sense that they can participate in the conversation about a celebration honestly and with their full truth. It may be more subtle. You could do a quiet, more intimate way to acknowledge their adoption that might suit them better. And so this is something that you'll have to just kind of observe, get their voice, and allow them the space to share their voice honestly. Another example of the big transition ahead of them is how you observe them coping with the actual process of the adoption. It's, again, normal for them to have mixed feelings about the adoption process and the finality of adoption. They may feel excitement, happiness, grief, loss, anger, confusion, all of the above. And when you make space for those emotions and make space for the mixed nature of those emotions, you're giving them time to process, and you're telling them that they are your priority, that you value their voice, that you value their experiences and how they're processing these experiences. It's pretty common for them to have all these mixed emotions, but it's also pretty common for them to be looking for a safe space and a safe person to process those with. And you should be that person for them. You and your partner, if you have one. You might also, offer them another safe adult if it's hard for them to process with you. Plenty of safe adults in their life is a good thing. And so giving them permission to process it with another safe adult is honoring of their voice and tells them that you care about them and how they're processing. A third example of the transition and change that's coming their way that they might have mixed feelings about is changing their name. And this can be a really touchy topic for a lot of families. You're excited because you're welcoming this child to your family, and you want them to have the belonging and the identity that comes with sharing your name. But if they're an older child, they may have pretty strong feelings about their name that they've carried thus far. And it's really important that you take time to listen to how they feel about changing their name. Many older children want some input on how this process happens, but they don't always know how to tell you that. And so bringing the conversation up and giving them space to have a different opinion than yours is really vital in this transition from foster care to adoption. Leaving room for that tells them, again, that you honor their experience and that you honor their identity, and you want to hold space and value for that in this relationship. One way to handle it is to wait until they're older and give them time to process their thoughts and feelings about it. If they are already older, it's helpful to ask them what they think or how they can come up with a name that suits what they think is who they are at this time. Honoring that communicates tremendous value to the child who just wants to be seen and heard and valued for who they are. Keep the dialogue open and keep revisiting all three of these issues while you're making space for the child to move from foster care to adoption on the timeline that feels right to them. When you honor and value their processes through all of these things, you're building trust and respect between you. That is the foundation you need for a healthy, attached, connected relationship for life. Tip number 4 is very practical in nature. It's to know when and where to seek help. It is not uncommon for families with new adoptions to experience a honeymoon period, and new behaviors start to crop up kind of when that transition period is over. So a common challenge that this child might experience when they move from foster to adopted is like a regression in their ability to regulate their emotions. Everything that they've got going on inside of them during this transition, it feels big. It can be confusing and it can be scary and it can be joyful and helpful too, but it's a lot to contain inside one kid. And so no matter their age, we have to be calm We have to be willing to share our calm, and we have to focus on the needs that are underneath the behavior to carry us through this transition period, but also into a solid foundation for a trusting, loving relationship. Releasing yourself from the pressure of knowing the right answer to every dilemma will help the child see that you are vulnerable and willing to learn. It will help them understand that they can trust you because they don't know all the answers, and it will feel safe to them to know that you don't know all the answers either. You can't get caught up in questioning everything. So it's going to have to be that you kind of selectively think about really what is the child expressing, even if the behaviors are really challenging. What is the child expressing or trying to express with that behavior? That might involve getting help from others. And again, you don't have to know all the answers all the time, but you have to know where to get the answers or who to go to for support. So you want to have a village around you that will support you, other people in your life who get it. We have a very active support group on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/creatingafamily. And that community of folks over there are very supportive and encouraging. They love sharing their experiences to help other families. But we also offer post-adoption support groups to learn about managing difficult behaviors, to learn about challenges that kids might face, or how to parent in a way that respects and honors the experiences they've had so far. And you can learn more about those by emailing info@creatingafamily.org. I would also highly recommend that you set up some adoption competent therapy, either as a whole family, or you and this child, or this child alone, depending on their age and their preferences, because you all want to learn some new tools and new ways to cope with the feelings that come with this big process. Respecting and honoring this child's experiences before joining your family and during the transition builds trust between you, and gathering all the tools around you for the long, slow transition and for the after of parenting them as your adopted child. These are all things that are crucial to building the trust and deepening the attachment between you. And these are things that will give them the foundation they need to thrive in your home, but also as they launch towards adulthood. No matter what, through this whole process, taking your time, educating yourself, giving space and voice, all of these things will communicate how deeply you value this child's thoughts and feelings, and it will all help them understand how crucial their well-being is to your whole family's well-being. So whether they're making small decisions or navigating significant life changes during this transition from foster care child to adopted child, they deserve to stand on a sturdy foundation of your love and your commitment and the sense of belonging that you can cultivate with them during this process. I hope this answer helps you and helps others like you who are moving from foster care to adoption, wherever you guys are in the process. I mentioned challenging behaviors earlier, and they are bound to happen. And I want to tell you about our brand new downloadable guide called Navigating Challenging Behaviors, Practical Strategies for Families. It's chock full of practical, supportive tools and strategies that will help you learn to see what's under the behavior and learn how to manage the behaviors so that the behaviors can improve. If you go to creatingafamily.org/newsletters, you can choose this resource as our thanks for subscribing to our free monthly newsletters. You will find it full of great information and very practical help, like I said. I love the section on self-care because self-care is one of my favorite things to talk about, but I think that self-care is a crucial element to successfully managing challenging behaviors in our families. Thanks so much for listening. I hope that this was helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.